All right, I'm going to assume that we are on, unless I hear otherwise, and jump right in here. All right, so I think most of us are here, so we can probably get started. All right, then welcome everyone who is able to join us today, this eve of Gen Con 2024, which we are all very excited about. Today is the much promised session on Gen Con TV where Richard Garfield himself joins us along with his long-term design partner, Scap Elias, to discuss the design and the philosophy behind Chaos Agents. Over the past few weeks, we have been running qualifier tournaments for the first Chaos Agents World Championship, which coincides with our transition from a pre-alpha playtest for Chaos Agents to an actual private alpha. And with that transition, we also thought that the game is at a state where our existing playtesters, as well as those of you who decide to join us at Gen Con, should get a chance to participate and show us who at this early stage is the Chaos Agent World Champion. But as we have been running these qualifiers, we've also had a lot of discussions about the philosophy behind Chaos Agents, the fact that there isn't really another game out there that is bringing these concepts, the tabletop gaming concepts, the ones that Richard has been developing over a few decades, with our collective passion for this genre of Autobattlers, and how this has come together to create this heady mix of genres and of gameplay styles to give us Chaos Agents today. So we've talked a lot about the basic design, but here today, for those of us who want to go deeper and learn more, we have the opportunity to actually discuss a lot of these philosophies with uh, Richard himself, and hopefully have a really fun discussion that will set the stage for our presence at Gen Con in a few days, where we will be running the World Championship at Gen Con, culminating on August 4th. And after that, we will have a lot more people joining us for our private alpha than we have had so far for the playtest. So with that out of the way, um, who are we? What are we doing here? Well, if you don't know, we are the team from Popularium. A few of us here have co-founded this company about 2 years ago, Richard, John, Scap, and myself. And we have been building Chaos Agents as our first game. That is, as I said, just about to hit private alpha. So the game was inspired by some very fundamental concepts that Richard had when the four of us met and started talking about what it is that we wanted to actually build as our first game. And very quickly, we converged upon this idea of an auto battler royale. So to kick us off, Richard, could you share a little bit of your thoughts on the genre of auto battlers? And obviously, among four of us, we've had many, many conversations. But for our audience, could you just kick us off with just generally your thoughts about auto battlers and why we picked sort of this genre to focus on as far as Chaos Agents is concerned?
Sure. Autobattlers have fascinated me for a while, as they have a lot of game designers and players. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is that it fits very nicely in the space between traditional computer games and board games. When you're playing an auto battler, you have time to make your move like you do in a board game and to think about what you're doing. But then the computer is integral. It's not an adjunct. It in resolving, and it makes it sort of fun to watch. So you get more than you would with just a board game, but you still benefit. You still feel like you're playing a board game. And one of the reasons that I like to think about it and have thought a lot about it, and have which has led us to Chaos Agents, is that I think it's clear that there's way more that can be done with this than is being done. And and a few of the things which sort of jumping ahead a bit that has led us to is this idea of making it so that it's a grand melee, what are the grand melees called? Um,
Battle royales.
Battle Royale, there you go. A Battle Royale, for example, a Battle Royale auto battler hasn't been done, but there's a lot of things that haven't been done with auto battlers, and I think they fit well with a lot of different design approaches, and so it's exciting to work on them and explore those possibilities.
That's very, very interesting. And, I guess I'd like to open the question up here to both Scaff and John, since, we've started this journey together 2+ years ago. What, Richard and Scaff and John, for you guys too specifically, gave you that early confidence that this mix of genres, as you said, with auto battlers, battle royales, hadn't been done before. We have some elements of MOBAs with the idea of the unique superhero, the unique chaos agent that each player gets to play with and deploy in the battlefield. What kind of gave you that initial confidence that there was a game in this kind of mix of genres that you were thinking about, given that we really didn't have any examples or prototypes really that we could follow? What gave you that inherent confidence in the early game design before we actually had a prototype?
For me, because Richard had really been enamored with Autobattlers for quite a while before it all started, and there was definitely a big question in my mind about whether those would work commercially, because I couldn't really understand to a large extent why more big companies weren't jumping in. So I will say, like, right up until I met you and John, and I was talking specifically about this, I was worried about the sort of commercial applicability of it, because I couldn't really understand how these things could be so fun, especially among a lot of people I knew and game designers and etc., and not be a bigger part of the genre. And then, of course, meeting you guys, especially John, having worked on one before, and talking about the difficulties in specific, that everything about them was great except for one thing, and then we thought we had a solution to that one thing. So really the coming together of the unique gameplay with the auto battlers was like almost two pieces of a puzzle fitted together. I'll let John talk about exactly what the missing piece was from the auto battler side.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting time, because when new genres show up, there's normally a big rush or a land grab for a bunch of people to try and make smart, interesting versions of that. And I was working on the Hearthstone team at the time, which pursued our own version of an auto battler with Hearthstone Battlegrounds. And so when we were assessing the genre, we could immediately tell there was tons of fun there. And the early indicators actually came from our China team, because they were seeing lots of success with the original auto chess game, which spawned as a mod. And so there was the seed of awesome fun. And so a bunch of the big companies really pursued this, but we all tried to rush out a great game because we were just so excited about it. But none of us really took the step back and tried to evolve that seed into something bigger and greater. And so a lot of our early discussions with Richard and Scaff and with you, Arca, were around, hey, what are the parts of the seed that are amazing, and what are the parts of the seed that need some extra love and care to make better. And some of those that we talked about was, we felt that there was a big social interaction miss in the genre as it was, because rather than being this grand melee like a battle royale, this is why we talk about battle royale so often, they're giant and social. It was more like just a sequential tournament, a bunch of 1v1 battles. And so it felt like it was big and social, but sort of in reality, it's 1v1 game. And all of us could talk about the pros and cons of 1v1 matches for sure. And the second big thing was, and I think that this is a thing that the whole industry is trying to figure out right now, is hey, how do you make the business of games work? Games have gotten more expensive to make, they have higher requirements, rolling them out is more complicated. The expectation that a game lasts for months or even years is just very different than games used to be. And so the auto battler games had answers for the fun, but less answers or fewer answers around um, how do you make this a sustainable business that can stand on its own. And so if you look around, a lot of the big auto battlers right now are still run sort of as sister projects to other major games that have big successful business models attached to them. And so in our discussions, that led us to some pretty cool and exciting ideas around, hey, what's going to excite a player? What's going to let us run this as a live service and be a successful indie game studio? And that was really what drew me into the project and made me have confidence that, hey, the gameplay is proven and fun. We have ways to make it even better and more exciting. And we can make a great game company to back a game like this.
Thank you, John. That's fascinating. Actually, I was just hearing from Brian Goldberg, who's another person who has been a big supporter of sort of this concept right from the beginning, who might actually be joining us in this hour, which might be exciting. John, that's very interesting. I want to just loop back to Richard, given the thoughts that you and Scav just expressed here, Richard, to maybe expand on that thinking a little bit more, where obviously John and Scav told us a little bit about the process in which we experimented and kind of got some early confidence before we actually started building something on why this approach might be fun. Richard, would love to hear from you about, when you were writing the early proposals, what your approach there was in terms of sort of what your vision was of how these pieces were fitting together. And then taking a step forward, further, in all of this, we really haven't discussed the aspect that the character that a specific player is playing with is globally unique. So in addition to the idea of the auto battler and battle royale coming together, we also lean this idea of the unique hero. So maybe Richard, you can expand a little bit more on how those three components are fitting together and why maybe those three components needed to come together. Because I can imagine a battle royale auto battler without necessarily having globally unique heroes, more like maybe having a more traditional MOBA type setup, a more traditional hero shooter, battle royale type setup. So why the unique hero aspect, and how does that tie in with the auto battler and battle royale?
Yeah, I had a blast working through all the possibilities that we could explore, and as anybody who's followed my work knows, I've been thinking a lot about unique deck games. That is, games where each person has their own assets, which are globally unique. So this is more extreme than a game like Magic, where you have a deck of your own choice that you can mix and match, and it makes it semi-unique depending on your resources and who's playing it. This is actually the deck you have in these games are unique. And it took me a long time before this idea was able to become a reality in paper, because it's a pretty demanding printing, technically it's a pretty demanding printing job. But the idea should lend itself much more easily to digital games. And so I've been giving a lot of thought to that. As you said, I actually don't think this is vital to this, because it's easy to imagine such a project without unique characters. However, I think they add a lot to the game and to games in general. So what there's a lot of things you can go into about why unique characters add to an environment, but I want to hit on some of my favorites, which are that a lot of games are sort of, especially games where there's a networked playing community, have a sort of scourge of orthodox play, which is to say that people will tell you what characters to play, what your build should be. They'll mock you if you don't play those builds, and uh, and 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 when people start adopting them, well, it makes it even harder to break that, even if there are solutions that go outside that orthodox. This is all thrown out the window to some extent with unique assets, because what you have at your available to you is unique, and so nobody can tell you to play a particular character because that character either doesn't exist or there's only one of them. So instead, play strategy and advice, orthodoxy, if you will, is going to be built around general advice, which leaves a lot more room for play, because you have to interpret that advice and figure out what it is rather than use a specific progression. And this lends itself to a much broader audience, a much broader possible play audience, because people exploring and doing things that are outside of the norm are baked in. It's hard to avoid those things, and that's what drives a lot of people in play, not just being the best in playing a single strategy, which you have confidence is going to work. So this this is one of the things that excites me about unique characters. And while I don't think it's necessary for a auto battler royale, I do think that it will work well there. And just to expand upon that a little more, because this is sort of an exciting enough thing that it's hard to not talk about. One of the things, even though very early on I had this idea that I wanted players to have a unique character, what that means wasn't clear at first. And eventually, what we settled on was this idea that everybody has their own unique skill map. And the reason why this is so exciting for me is because when I play an RPG or anything which during the course of it, like a MOBA, where you level up and you choose powers and so forth, the most exciting thing to do is to look at that little sheet and sort of see what my possible builds are. And to have that built into the character in a unique way where it doesn't look like anybody else's, and it gives you different terrain to explore each time you play it. Well, that was a very appealing idea to me, and so I'm very excited to see that rolled out, and I think it's going to really appeal to a lot of players.
That's super fascinating, obviously, and culmination of a lot of conversations with you. Scaff or John, did you want to expand upon what Richard said there at all before I kind of dive into a couple of next questions I have on my side?
Sure. I think Richard touched upon this, but just to sort of re-emphasize it or bring it out to the front, and this is partially because I've had to hear him lament some of the things lost in Magic across 30 years of working with him. Is in the beginning in Magic, the uniqueness of people's positions was enforced just by scarcity. I mean, like when we didn't print enough cards, in the math, the physics department to have everyone have every deck they wanted. And the more it became about this optimization problem that became better and better known, the more of that uniqueness and exploration was lost. Now you gained something else, which was great, but unfortunately it came sort of at the expense of that early feeling. And so really it's just trying to set the game up to begin with from the initial moments, where it's going to be more about exploration than about optimization. Both are great, both are fun to do. People like to do both those things, but a lot of times, especially with the global marketplace and everybody's playing, almost every video game, slips more and more toward the optimization side, which is just inherent, with today's technology and the way business works. So building that in from the beginning, where everything's unique, like Richard said, your exploration is your own. I mean, again, you get advice from others, but it's not in the same way you do from most games. Your skill chart, I can't just pull up a wiki like I can with League of Legends and immediately get, oh, these are the 3 best ways to build your character out or whatever. So here, in addition to your own character being unique, you don't have no idea what you're going to show up against. And this is part of where the Battle Royale kind of even enhances this effect. We expect particular instances of the game to play very differently depending upon what type of characters kind of randomly show up. And then one last thing I wanted to emphasize about the Battle Royale part of it is that it can be kind of daunting, right? Because you have this character, you're exploring it. You don't really have any idea how it's going to interface with others. And the Battle Royale part is really interesting because it lowers, a lot your pressure to go down this optimization path, because you're not going to win. You're playing against 100 other people or whatever, like in Fortnite. I mean, you don't go in with the expectation of winning. You go in with the expectation kind of having fun. And so it takes that 50-50 win pressure off of the way, two-sided games work. So like it really, again, adds one more sort of force of, onto this exploration and fun being more important than optimization. Which should all work together.
Yeah, I think what Scaffs and Richard have said there is really important. I think a lot of what players are looking for these days is they're either looking for those high, like, test my skill, optimize the heck out of everything gameplay, or they're looking for the more exploratory experience of games. And at least for me personally, like, most of my fondest gaming memories around those exploration times, the early days of World of Warcraft, where you didn't just get dictated on, this is your rotation, this is your talent tree, this is exactly how you do it. Early days with League, early days with most PvP games end up that way. And then this big movement towards battle royales was really appealing to me for exactly what Scaff was talking about. It took the pressure off, like, both from as a player and then as a game maker. As a player, I don't ever want that 50% win rate. I want like a 60-70% win rate to always feel like, oh, I'm better than average. That's what I'm looking for my entertainment products. And so those 1v1 games, or even like 5v5 team games that force that 50-50 win rate eventually, really struggle with that. And the magic of Battle Royale is they just threw that all out. Like, your chance of winning, if everybody was equal skill, is like 1 of 100, like a 1% chance. And so you're just forced to invent your own sort of, how am I going to have fun this time? What are my goals? And that, the whole battle royale genre just harkened to me back to the early WoW days of, like, I'm inventing my own things, or I'm just going to go wander in that direction, and maybe I find some quests or cool stuff to do. And battle royales feel that way. Because they have this roguelike or roguelite behavior in them that I think is really fun. Like, you want to have vectors of mastery, so you feel like you're getting better at a game, but you want the vectors of randomness and excitement and difference every time. And the auto battler genre has a lot of that. Like, the whole crux of an auto battler is every time you play through, both your opponents are doing weird different things, you're being dealt a different set of cards or powers or whatever, and everybody's interacting in these different ways, so you get this roguelike gameplay that's really compelling. And then if you add in more of the battle royale elements, I think you can capture an audience in a fun and exciting way who's looking for, like, the social wackiness of battle royale and the really fun strategic gameplay of an auto battler, because auto battlers do this thing that we would talk about. we would often cite Plants vs. Zombies as this magical game where your tutorial sort of never ends. Each new map, they like sprinkle a little bit in that forces you to change how you think about the game and change your plan with all of your plants. Um, and I think that battle royales do that exceptionally well. And so um, I think all of these genres do that in this really fun way where every time I click play, it's a new experience. Like, doesn't matter how prepared I was in the past, there is advantages to being more prepared and really understanding my character and understanding the map and all of this. You have vectors of lore advancement that matter. But every time is like a different fun experience. And I think that's why these games last so long. And the ones that really last are the ones that pull into the social components so that you're having fun with friends. And I think this probably ties to some of the reason board games are so successful and have had this renaissance is it's that around the table fun with friends is just like why they work. Like I want to get together with my friends. I want to do something for 2 hours that flexes my brain and we get to have fun. And so I think the more video games lean into the social nature, the better they end up being. Obviously, there are exceptions, but at least for me, I have those fond memories of Mario Kart with friends or GoldenEye or Halo, just really compelling because of the social aspect. And I think that's why Fortnite is so successful. Like if you talk to anybody in the younger generations, they're playing it with their friends and just having fun more so than focused on winning.
That's super interesting. And I want to come back to the exploration versus optimization and how that's actually worked out in practice so far. But before that, I just want to switch gears for a second and go to Richard and actually just continue on the thread that John just brought up here. We're here on Gen Con TV. We are going to be at Gen Con doing our first World Championship. So, Richard, knowing the Gen Con audience as well as you do for as many years as you do, what are some of the things that you think the Gen Con audience and the tabletop gaming audience specifically can look out for in Chaos Agents as sort of an innovation that might bring some of the design concepts or some of the gameplay concepts that they are used to enjoying, as John was saying, around the table or across from an opponent. How do we see that translating to Chaos Agents? What are some of the things that a traditional tabletop gamer might look at and say, "Wow, that's cool. That how that has translated into this massive grand melee type battle."
Well, I think a lot of tabletop gamers either they've got a arm's length distance. They keep an arm's length from digital games, being very picky about which ones they go to, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But this game they should find tabletop appeal to this game for a number of reasons. One is that one reason that they often keep an arm's length, I believe, is because of this. When you have a game which has a community of players, it becomes often razor sharp as far as how competitive it is, and not everybody wants to join into this this large ladder grind where everything is judged on how high up the ladder you're doing. This unique asset approach, as we've already talked about, softens it, which allows them to play this game in an exploratory mode, as I believe they often do with tabletop games. Another thing is that is special to tabletop games, which is lacking from a lot of digital games, is the sense of community. And it is impossible to replace playing around the table. So you have to work with what you have and do the best you can. But the structure for a grand melee auto battler is particularly good for building digital community. And the reason for that is because you have a planning phase which where you do your gameplay, and after that you have a resolution phase where you watch the auto battler tell you what happened. Now during that resolution phase, you can get up and go get a cup of coffee, something that I might be prone to do, or you can chat. You can chat. You actually have time, no matter how old and slow you are, to type, or if you have a voice link, you can talk. These are things which you cannot easily do in a MOBA, for example. When you're playing a MOBA, you are focused on that, and you have to be a superstar to be able to socialize with it at the same time. That's not true with this game, and that's pretty special.
That's wonderful. And there is Brian. Hi, Brian. Joins us at a very timely moment here. We are just talking about essentially what the Gen Con audience, the tabletop gaming audience specifically, can look forward to from Chaos Agents, and why the folks at Gen Con might be interested in checking out Chaos Agents, because it brings a lot of these concepts to fore. And with that, maybe I turn the question over a little bit to both Scaff and John before we kind of explore this whole idea of exploration versus optimization a little bit more. Scaff, you obviously have been designing games with Richard for several decades now, and John and Brian both have really impressive Magic card collections and so on. So obviously, all of us are very embedded into the tabletop community also. Scaff, maybe you can share some of your thoughts, building on what Richard said around what the tabletop community can potentially expect from Chaos Agents, and then would love to hear from John and Brian both as essentially fans and connoisseurs of the genre from a gamer's perspective, on what John has drawn you to essentially build this structure with us, and maybe we can go from there. So, Scaff, I will maybe ask you to build on what Richard said there a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I think this one, it's hard to say anything that he didn't really say, but the socializing during the game is very important to us. As he mentioned, both the Battle Royale, in terms of taking the pressure off and kind of randomizing what you expect to see from game to game, and the Auto Battler giving you this space to socialize easily, are both really important aspects. We really think that is something that that's kind of, if it's not unique, it's at least unusual. We also have like 3 different victory conditions, again, that are co-equal. So that's another thing that, along with the Battle Royale aspect, kind of, again, takes the pressure off to perform in a specific way. It kind of lets you, look at different aspects of your character and what's happening on the battlefield, in relative to you, but also relative to what's going on around you. So again, just more opportunity for discussion. The other thing for tabletop players that they're sort of more used to, especially in the TCG genre, is kind of this collectability aspect. Like, people are proud of their Pokemon collection, even they may not have all the Pokemon cards, but you become attached to these things in a way that you don't become attached to, I don't know, the pieces in chess or the cards in poker, or like, to take sort of other examples, $100 bill Monopoly. Those are sorts of things that for the TCG genre are kind of special, and we're doubling down on that with the uniqueness of your agents. We really want people to have many agents. We want them to become attached agents. We want them to hate agents, get rid of them. Like, we want all of these things going on, so that, again, that's not general tabletop wise, but it definitely happens in TCGs. It also happens in RPGs as well, right? The character that you have, over time, just depends on how the campaign went. Your characters are different every time. what you find, how you equip your character. Like, so you take a snapshot of a character at some point, and it's just different than all the other characters, and that's a really interesting aspect of these games, is this attachment through being special and unique. And so again, this game really super emphasizes that. And once again, back to the multiple victory conditions sorts of thing. It's like in Dungeons and Dragons, right? There's not a best character. It doesn't even make any sense. And so this is, while not all the way to an RPG, it is along those lines about how your character is interesting in its interactions, not just one-dimensional. How good are you at winning?
Fantastic. So just continuing on that thread and just maybe switching it around to a gamer's perspective for a second, maybe John and then Brian, you can share a little bit on, as a tabletop gamer or as someone, as folks who have enjoyed over the years collecting and creating magic cards and so on. John, maybe you can take the side of the gamer and what as a gamer excites you with all the concepts that Richard and Scaff were just talking about here.
Yeah, I think the thing that's always excited me, both in tabletop games and video games themselves, is the stories you end up being able to tell. And some companies take the stance of, we're going to tell you the story, which absolutely works. Like, I love God of War. I love a bunch of these games like that. They dictate the story. But my fondest memories are always player stories and player experiences. Again, going to WoW, like those goofy moments when you're with a group in a dungeon and somebody does something, either because they're bored or they pull something wrong, you end up in a stressful situation, you're yelling at each other, but at the end you win. You end up with these stories. And for me, the thing that has excited me is a lot of the stuff that Scaff and Richard talked about, of the origination of Magic, or even today with draft modes, or Hearthstone Arena, or those experiences that every time is different. You end up with stories, and that's the really compelling thing. And I think these two genres really combine in this fun way to let you have your own story, so you can go grab Brian even a couple days after whatever happened in your match and be like, oh my God, Brian, like this thing happened. It was so crazy. Like, I pulled out this victory for all of these reasons. And like, that's a part of the social that I think people maybe undervalue, is my water cooler moments with friends who didn't even participate with me, just to tell them of like the fun thing that happened. It's the same stuff we do with sports as well, where when we go talk to our friends and be like, oh man, did you see that play, blah blah blah, like it's this discussion of a funny or lucky or cool moment in your entertainment experience that really materializes that in your brain as, this was good. And so I have tons of fond Magic memories. I was a very early player. I'm a big collector type as well. And so just thinking about our game and unique heroes, it really makes me think that we can build these exciting stories. And we're already seeing those stories in the community with characters like Hamfist, which originally got started because he has a goofy name, but then it continued because he actually was a very strong character. And so that sort of stuff, I think, is really the thing that me as a gamer, that I'm excited about, and I'm excited as a game developer to bring to people. So that's sort of my take. Stories are really compelling, and I think this unique character approach really lends itself to even more wacky stories. And to Scaff's point, you'll even have the sharing the, oh my God, I rolled a character and he looks goofy or silly in all of these ways. But your friend might say, oh my God, that sort of clownish look is super cool to me. And so I think all of those stories, you're just trying to build like a gemstone, a bunch of facets that people can appreciate the aspects of your game and the aspects of your IP and your characters. And I think we've done a good job so far, and we're going to keep investing here to make it awesome and exciting for our players.
Thank you, John. That's super interesting, and I think just continuing on that thread and going to Brian for a second. So for the audience, Brian has been one of our most ardent supporters for since the beginning of Popularium, and has recently joined our board of directors and has been helping us a lot in terms of essentially getting the game out there. So Brian, given your early interest in the game, I would love to also hear about your side of sort of your traditional interest in tabletop games, especially games like Magic. And you've also, in our discussions, compared sort of your experience with one of your favorite genre franchises, Diablo, and sort of, what sometimes you wish that game offered. So maybe you can give a little bit of a take, a slight game design outsider's take, given that the other four of us are very deep into the design of this game. Would love to hear from you. Essentially, the same thing that John talked about. It's a gamer's take on what makes us interesting, both as a tabletop gamer as well as a traditional RPG, action RPG fan. Brian, you're on mute. I apologize.
There we go. Yeah, so excited by all of this. I know this is, I'll try to frame things from a tabletop standpoint, since that's officially the audience here. And I've always been very interested in how tabletop has converted to digital. And I'm going to date myself, but I remember Magic in virtually every digital form factor it's ever taken. The first one took place, Rich will remember this, maybe 2 years after the game took off. I want to say like 1996. I think it was Maxis who put out the first version, and it was a very literal translation of Magic online. And of course, this predated YouTube by many, many years. This predated really even online play. I've played Magic the Gathering online, which was kind of stable but unremarkable. And then when Arena came out, I want to say Arena came out around 2014, 2015, something like that. And it was the first time I felt like the graphics and the feel of the game had really delivered. But if there was a disappointment with Arena, it's that it felt like by the time Magic had finally reached a digital online form factor that felt modern and had some pizzazz to it and felt fast and clean, and by the time the technical side got figured out, I felt like a lot of the soul of the game was missing. And that's not to take away from Arena. I love the graphic effects. I love some of the sizzle and some of the flavor they got right with that product. But at the end of the day, by the time we were playing Magic, a historically tabletop game in a high quality online form factor in 2016, 2017, we got to the point where you could just go on YouTube and every new season of Standard was spoiled within 10 days or 14 days. And it just kind of showed that for all the technical advancements of Magic, the tabletop game in its online form factor, at the end of the day, there are limitations. There are limitations in converting an analog product, even a perfect analog product like Magic that we love so much, into the digital modern world, where information flows so fast and in which even a fairly high number of potential combinations, permutations of decks can be sort of spoiled and hacked and gotten down to sort of all the builds are out there all the decks are out there in 10 or 14 days. And then you have these sort of lingering Standard seasons where the final 8 to 10 weeks of a Standard season, there's just not much innovation because you really feel like they've figured out all there is to figure out. And you've hacked which is the best deck, and you go on YouTube and watch people debate it. And so much of that sort of infiniteness and mystery is gone. And I don't think there's a salt for it. And that's not for me to say that we don't love tabletop games. I mean, you mentioned Diablo. The same thing for Diablo. Diablo has seasons that are also on a sort of quarterly basis, but within 3 to 4 weeks of a season starting, every single build has been hacked. Every single optimal combination of skills, armament, and Paragon boards have been figured out within 3 or 4 weeks. There's not a lot of innovation after the first few weeks of a season. And in many ways, Diablo did takes sort of a board game. It still is tied in many ways to sort of the board game feel when it comes to skilled trees and Paragon boards. I just think with Chaos Agents, there's a chance to sort of break the paradigm. And obviously, who better to do it than Richard? But I think that we are seeing in the age of YouTube and in the age of just so much information online that, you know, we just need a new paradigm altogether. And we need a chance to have a game where there are truly infinite combinations, and you're not going to be able to just go on YouTube and get the right answer after 3 weeks of a season starting. And it's a huge code to crack. But you know, if anyone can do it, it's this team. But it's a tall order, and the game has really evolved, and the game Chaos Agents is getting there. But if it can be solved, it's gonna be incredible, because I love tabletop games. I think everyone watching this loves tabletop games. No one's saying we're all moving on. No one's abandoning you know, what comes with cards and with something that is either literally physical or has its roots in a physical medium. But it feels like with Chaos Agents, there's a chance to really sort of cut the cord, as it were, and sort of go in a completely new direction. And it's an experiment I think everyone has to be excited about. And I think the more you love tabletop games and the more you grew up with them going on, you know, 30 plus years, the more you're excited to see if that cord can be cut and sort of you can get in this world of sort of infinite combinations that can't be spoiled or figured out within weeks of a new set dropping.
That was super interesting, Brian. It was really interesting how you connected some of those essentially like core concepts that all of us have talked about, which is no matter how infinite the gameplay pool seems to begin with something like Magic, Diablo, pretty much any of these large systems that come out, it just seems like after a while we narrow it down to a few viable ones competitively, and I think that's a huge exciting thing about Chaos Agents, which also actually brings me to one of the early themes, which we've just started getting some questions in here. So please start funneling them in. We'll try to get as many of those answers in the next 10 minutes or so as possible. But the first question that came in actually ties in really nicely with the theme of exploration versus optimization, and essentially what we're talking about here, which we've talked about how excited we are about this aspect of unique heroes, and that no two heroes play exactly the same, and that for each hero or agent you have potentially infinite build variety based on the specific circumstances, which is all great. But that also brings us to sort of the reverse side of optimization versus exploration. So Richard, just maybe coming back to you, and I would love to hear John and Scap's thoughts on this also, which is how do you think about balance in a game like this? This is a question that has come up many times. We've discussed it ourselves. We know objectively that some agents are going to be more powerful than others. What does that mean exactly? And when all of these agents get put into this heady mix, are we always going to see certain agents rise to the top? Or if not, how do we intend to balance the overall ecosystem? I know, Richard, this is a topic near and dear to your heart, so maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, that is an important thing about the game to be upfront about. A lot of people, asked how Keyforge was balanced and how we balanced it so well sometimes, and how we failed to balance in others. And it's all being driven by this idea that all the agents have to be fair. And that is not only impossible to do, but attempting to do so would make the game worse. And that's because the more you attack that, the less variety you get in the game. So that's not to say there is no balance. We want to make it so that but we want to value the variety of possibilities more than the balance. This in games sounds unusual from the perspective of a tabletop game player, but from the broader game world, which includes sports, this is not at all unusual. There are many sports where the elements you have are the players, and from the perspective, for example, of football, you can say if the manager or the team owner is playing a game and their pieces are the players. They are wildly unfair. wildly varied. That's what makes it so cool and interesting. And the presence of that variety and difference in power doesn't make that less appealing, but it does put pressure on you in constructing meta games, like the way in which you compete, as good as possible and as varied as possible to handle as broad a mix of different players as possible. So we have to find a place for the very powerful characters to play and for the weaker characters. And not only that, though, since the person who's playing them will affect how well they do, you you'll find that if you are not such a strong player, you will, even with a strong character, you may go further than you expect, but you may not go to the top. And similarly, if you're wait a minute, did I get that backwards? If you're a strong player, you may take a weak character further than you would expect. And if you're a weak or more casual or more exploratory, you might not go as far as you would expect. But you sort of set your own standards. And one of the things I like about the structure, as I said, there's too much to unpack with unique agents to do it all in one sitting. It would be the focus of the entire time. But we've talked a lot about how the unique agents allows you to explore more and be less in the thrall of the orthodox. But another thing that I really like about it is it allows you as a player access to both high level competition and low level competition without sort of screwing up the rating. So in a game with a single ladder, you can't play a bad deck, for example, without screwing up your rating. You can't, and if you care about the rating, that tells you how you want to play and limits your gameplay choices. If you don't care about the rating, then what the hell is it there for? So with this game, your rating is attached, at least one dimension of it is firmly attached to the character. And so you could play a particular character very carefully in order to get them as far as possible, but you're not, as a player, hosed by choosing to play a weaker character and seeing how far you could take them, or playing another character and just playing them casually, because your whatever standards for progress you have are character to character. They're not choked by the bottleneck of the player.
That's fascinating, and this also it's very interesting in relation to one of the questions that just came out, and would love to open this up to Scaff and John, and maybe then we can go through a little bit of questions from that you guys have for each other for the last few minutes. But I think the last question from my side, as well as echoing something that just came in from the Q&A, is sort of expectations versus reality. I think when we went into the design of this game, we had a lot of expectations on how things may or may not work out. In the past year that we've been running the playtest, John, maybe you can start us off, and Scaff, you can add your thoughts. How has that played out so far in practice? I know that we don't have the full-fledged skill tree format yet that we are going to work up towards, but we started with just giving people 5 skills and 5 elements, and now people are playing with about 24, 25 unique, fairly unique skills. The skill map is pretty unique. How have you seen that, John, play out in reality in terms of sort of these, both the power spike, power curve variations, and how that has played out with the community in terms of the community satisfied, or what might be some of the things that we want to, what are some of the challenges that we have in front of us as we move towards alpha and beyond?
Yeah, we spent a fair bit of time talking about skills and skill system and how skill maps and all that stuff compose together. But then the reality of our development is we haven't been able to fulfill a bunch of that path of where we know we need to go. And so it's all about incremental gains. But the amazing thing to me, which I wouldn't have bet on early on the project, is even with a pretty limited number of skills, you can still get a lot of variation amongst characters and play. And you could already see these things that we theorized early on coming to fruition on there are characters that seem to have a stronger combination of powers. But you also have experienced this reality of sometimes someone lets their agent go because they can't crack the code on what makes them great, and another person picks them up and proves, oh, this character's actually good because they crack the code. And so it really is, I think it's materialized in my brain at least on, hey, like this system is going to work out. As we add more skills, more variation, it's going to be more and more fun, like juggling between, ooh, do I draft Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady? Like they're fundamentally different quarterbacks. They fulfill the same role and maybe play because they play the same position the same way, but they're still like unique, different people. And the same thing's true for our agents in play that we see today. And I definitely think that there's always movement within our community on XYZ agent is strong, and here's why we think they're strong. And we'll do subtle little things that then make that agent less strong, or somebody has figured out, oh, I figured out a good agent to counter that, where previously this was a very great shard master character, but somebody found a better shard master character. And so like the meta is always moving, and I think that that's what we really want from our unique agents, is that constant movement, that constant discussion, without the finger pointing and saying you're playing it wrong. I can't remember if Richard or Scaff said it in the beginning, but that reality of like, you are the expert on your character, your agent, like you are the one who's playing the most, you are the one who's discovered the things they're good and bad at. People can give you coaching advice on, oh, maybe you should do XYZ, but you're the expert. And so their ability to tell you you're playing it wrong is pretty low. That's not to say we don't have that happen every so often, but it's just much lower than when you're in a situation like Magic where, oh, hey, I want to go play a goblin deck, and somebody just tells me, oh, goblins aren't part of the meta. Like, you're dumb. I think I always find that frustrating. Like, I'm mostly I go to games for fun. And for some people, fun is just crushing and having that great win rate. For me, it's mostly just ending up with those stories that I referenced earlier.
Goblin decks are usually fun for sure. Yeah, Richard, please go on. Jump in, please.
Yeah, while John was talking, I realized that even though I said balance is a part of the game, it's just not done in the traditional way. I did not explain how balance was done and why it isn't just throw whatever you like out there. The balance is not done on a agent-to-agent level. We don't worry about if a particular agent is super weak or super strong. What we do care about is that the mechanics that make up those agents don't dominate one another too badly. So for instance, if you have one skill, which the presence of it is required for you to be a champion, that's bad balance. Or if you have one set of simple sub-skills and you need that in order to excel, that's bad balance. For example, if all the top players had to have fire attacks or something like that, and otherwise you don't need to come, you may as well not play, or you're never going to make it to the top. You want to keep those sub-elements balanced. Now, for individual skills, this will be reasonably easy to keep in check, add checks and balances. For large subfamilies, it's a little harder, and that'll be a moving target because they will sort of come about, and people will find metas to answer them. But in general, there is such a thing. I don't think there is such a thing as this agent in particular is too powerful, but I do think there is such a thing as this set of skills is too powerful.
Mm-hmm. So,
got it.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Can I jump in with a question for Richard? You've developed games. I'm not a game developer. My guess is that in the early genesis of any game, tabletop or digital native, the pursuit of balance is probably one of the hardest things to do, to a point where you probably don't want to overinvest in it. And I think it's for all of us looking back at the early days of Magic, we can sit here with 30 years of hindsight and say, how did Richard ever think the Black Lotus wasn't overpowered? How did he ever think that Moxes were a good idea, and it's easy to say it now. At the time, I'm sure it wasn't as obvious a decision. But then again, 30 years ago, 31 years ago, you guys didn't have a pool of 6,000 play testers to try this crazy idea you guys had. I mean, is some of that philosophy the same today, basically saying you can't focus on balance because you're not going to be able to? Because even though Chaos Legions has a surprisingly big and dedicated pool of playtesters, it's such a drop in the ocean of what you would need to really even get any sort of meaningful success at testing balance, that it's sort of like, if something's got to go, just sort of cast it to the wind. I mean, is there an argument for that?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things there that need to be unpacked. I've got a somewhat a different view of balance than a lot of designers have. But I think with the game design, what you want to do is make sure the tools are there to design to make things go to the balance you want, but that also that balance is a moving target, which evolves, as I think you suggest, from as your play group evolves. So the notion, for instance, of magic being unbalanced at the beginning is often thrown around from today's perspective, but it wasn't merely that that there wasn't a play test involved, because we had 2 years of play test with quite a smart set of play testers, and we knew a lot of the balance problems with magic, but the reality of it was that the player base wasn't up to that. So it's a useful exercise to think back to the days of Magic, to the early days of Magic, and think about things like Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall, which is one blue for 3 cards. These are overpowered by today's standards, and they're also overpowered by some years after Magic came out. But there was a significant period of time where players were trading, moxes for lands, and because a mox, because they both provide mana, and the only difference is the cost of a mana, and or they were the Black Lotus, it goes away, and so land is better. So would the game have, for those players, have been better if we said, oh, you know what, we should make Ancestral Recall cost 3 mana or 4 mana? So suddenly this card, which is overpowered in some sense, is even less appealing to the people who are rejecting it at the time. It's a less fun environment. Mm-hmm. And that's something which I see a lot in game design, where it's what I like to call is overdeveloping. And I've played a number of games where it's very hard to get into and very dry, and the people who are very entrenched in the game just love it, but it's a dwindling small audience, mostly of people who are developing it all along. And when I play it, I look and I think, wow, this game looks like it would have been fun at the start before they made it all balanced, right? There's nothing left here for me. I have to invest hundreds of hours in order to be able to appreciate the fine grade of balance that there is now. So there is some value also. So I guess to summarize, so I don't keep going on, but balance is a moving target. You have to balance, and we need the tools to be able to appropriately balance. And that exploring balance is something which is fun to do, and you can't do it if you pay too much attention to it too early. At least most people can't.
Got it. I'm going to just jump in here because we are at the end of our live stream time here. We'll just wrap up with a few final thoughts from Scap and so on, and we'll probably end the stream. So thank you, everyone who joined us today, and we hope that you're going to be joining us at Gen Con. It's going to be a lot of fun to actually test out all of these things that we've just been talking about. And to our play testers, thank you so much for your dedication over the past year. We can't wait to get in the alpha. But with that, we will end the stream and let the next program take over. But Scap, if you wanted to jump in with the thoughts that you've been sitting on.
Yeah. We really messed up was the metagame. So like we thought like, oh, if everyone has exactly one deck, would you rather have a Mock Sapphire or a Fireball or a Shivan Dragon or whatever? And clearly those are much better if you have one of them. And so I think that, but that leads back to what Richard was saying about the balance part, is that the metagame structure that developed around Magic was wildly different than we expected it to be. And in that situation, those cards were unbalanced. And the fix was not to Harrison Bergeron nerf the cards like people do in online games today. It was to change the metagame structure. So say, oh, you can only have one of, or these are, eventually banned. And that's very similar to how sort of what Richard was saying about initially 2 times ago, how the metagame structure is basically how we intend to balance these characters. The best analogy to what he was saying about individual skills is, like in football, right? You have a combine. Well, at the combine, you don't automatically know what the best player is. That's what we want to make sure. That's our job for balance, is to make sure that you can't just have the combine and immediately know who the best player is. We don't even need to play the season out. That's sort of the key part of our balance, is to keep that mystery there, where the individual skills are not too easy to determine value. The agent, we want the value of the agent to be determined in play. Some agents will be better than others, and that should be handled at the metagame, not the individual nerfing level. Sorry, I tried to sum everything up really quickly, Arca, because you
said... No, that was fantastic. And I think we can just take a few minutes to just any final questions we have to each other, any final thoughts we have, and then, we will wrap this up officially. And again, thank you to all of you for your time today. Any wrap-up thoughts from John, Richard, Brian here?
Just get the game in more people's hands. The more people who play it, the pursuit of balance will eventually come to pass.
Fantastic. Well, if there are, yeah, please, John, go on. Do you have maybe a final question or thought for the team?
We're just entering this next fun phase of the limited alpha, and that's where rubber hits the road even more than it is right now. So we're excited to have more people joining us on this journey and touching the game before it's public released. So thank you to our community, as you mentioned, and thank you to our future community who's going to join us on this journey.
Well, on that note, to wrap us up, maybe each of us can just say one thing that you're most excited about as we head into alpha. Maybe John, starting with you.
Oh, the biggest thing I'm excited about is fulfilling that uniqueness promise that the game is built around. I've been spending tons of time on the art side, figuring out how we're going to do that artistically. We've had countless discussions about how we're going to do that via skills. And I think the more and more we can fulfill that, the more and more of the fun that's going to be exposed to our players. So I'm all about diving in on uniqueness here, making that roguelike experience come to life.
Brian, what about you, as someone who has been following the game for a while? What are you looking forward to as far as the alpha is concerned?
I want to be able to play at weird hours. So right now we all got to agree to play at the same time, and I'm usually I'm like, I want to go to play at 3 a.m. on Friday into Saturday and have like 10 people there to join me.
5 a.m. right now over here. Yes, definitely. That's definitely something we're looking forward to. Scaffold, how about you?
Yeah, I'll combine the two of theirs to get Brian more players. We got to get more players in, but then the agents won't be unique anymore because with the amount of skills we have. So we need to do John's thing about getting lots more skills in there, so that once we get in lots more players, we still keep this. We want the skill amount to be sort of ahead of the number of playtesters always, so that they're, swimming in an ocean.
I can vouch for that. And active skills, which change the deploys, is something that our community has gotten wind of and are super excited about. So lots to come there. Richard, how about you? Why don't you wrap us up with what you are most excited about for the private alpha?
Yeah, I'm excited about what John is, but I'm going to be more specific on it. I'm looking forward to seeing these skill maps and have them not look like just lists. Again, one of the visual things, which excites me the most about looking at a game like Diablo, is first thing I like to do is flip to see what sort of crazy skill charts there are and the different things I can do within it. And I think that's going to be a really exciting thing to look at and think about with your characters.
Fantastic. Well, if I could end with one of my own, I am really looking forward to the World Championship. And already in the qualifiers, some very unexpected results have popped up. One of my favorite things has been to see playtesters whom we haven't seen for a few months. The game has changed radically. Just like walk in, and people who used to be really good back then just continue to be good, regardless of the agent that they get, which is fantastic. You had at least two people who just walked into the qualifiers after like 2 or 3 months of not seeing them and just walked out with a gold ticket. So I'm really interested to see how that mixes then with people whom we are going to teach the game at Gen Con, and they're going to be thrown into the deep end right away. So what's going to emerge? Are veterans from a year or plus, or one of these newcomers whom we haven't met yet, the people at Gen Con?
It's going to be a newcomer. It's going to be a newcomer.
Oh, well, we should take wagers there. We should take wagers there across the five of us. So you say newcomer, I say playtest, I say existing playtester. What about you, John?
Love it.
John, what's your pick?
I think an existing playtester is gonna take it.
Richard, what about you?
I'm going to double down on that.
All right, and Scap, what about you?
No idea, just excited to find out the answer.
All right, so we have 3 and 1 here, and Brian's pulling for the new guys and gals. So we will see you at Gen Con and see how this all plays out. But in any case, thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you all for hanging out on our stream, joining the qualifiers, and it's all going to come to a head at Gen Con and then the private alpha after that. So really excited to continue the journey with all of you. Thank you so much. And thank you always, as always, our partners at Gen Con TV for giving us this valuable airtime. Thank you all.